Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new Hello Bluebird page turner stamp set. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to jump right in because I'm going to be doing a lot of Copic coloring in this video. I am starting out with her skin, and I am using E000, E00, and E11 for that. So I'm starting with the E11 and doing some shadows up under her hairline and on the back of her neck, the back of her hand and legs, and I gave her a little divot for her kneecap. I also put a shadow above her nose since she has those long bangs hanging down, and then I blended out with the E00 and then the E000. Then I used R11 and R20 to give her a nice rosy cheek, just going to the left of her eye there, right between her eye and her ear. And then I'm going to move on to her hair. So the hair is going to take a little bit. Hair is a bit more complicated than coloring just basic images, especially if you want it to have different highlights and lowlights and not just to look flat. So the colors I'm going with are E51, E53, E55, and E57. This is going to give me a nice kind of warm blonde, like a dirty blonde, into a light brown. And really, depending on how much you use of the lighter or darker colors, this is a great combo to go all the way from like a really nice blonde to a brunette. So I'm starting with my lightest shade, the E51, and kind of mapping out where I wanted my shadows to go. And then I'm going in with each darker color and drawing those out even further. The reason I start with my lightest color is because if I make a mistake and kind of don't like where I have put the little streaks, I can kind of color over those later on with darker colors. So I like to build up the layers when I do hair. So I'm working my way all the way up to the E57 now and just adding little flicks here and there where the hair is going to be a little bit darker at the roots or where it is gathered together into her little top knot. And then I'm going to work my way back down. So now I'm using the E55, pulling those colors out even further. And I'm going to continue working my way all the way down to that E51 again. And that is how I like to do hair and build up the colors, like I said, so that you have the space in between all those dark portions for the highlights to really show up. So once I've got that first layer going all the way up to the darkest and then all the way down to the lightest, I can start to go back in with a second layer, kind of filling in any gaps where, you know, I didn't have any streaks and maybe there's like too much of the lighter area. And I can just continue filling that in until I get a tone that I'm happy with. So you could absolutely leave it here and it would be a nice pale blonde, but I decided to go back in with a second layer and just increase that depth and make it a little bit more of a really pale brunette or a dark blonde. So hair is still something that makes me a bit nervous to color because, you know, it's a lot more complicated than other images, but if you just take it step by step, it's not too bad. Still, I feel like every different hairstyle is unique and requires like a different way of coloring it in, where you put the streaks and where you put the highlights and lowlights and all of that. So I am leaving the full coloring process of her hair in the video today. It makes me a little bit nervous because I know it makes the video long, but I just wanted to show you really each step that I went through. I even decided to darken up the really dark areas with the E59, so I bumped it up one, but I'm being very, very thin with my strokes, using the very tip of that marker, holding it straight up and down to just get a little bit of that, and then I jumped straight down to the E53 to kind of blend that out as my final layer. So I'm going to keep the E55, E57, and E59, and I'm going to use those shades to color in the wood frame at the bottom of this armchair. So I'm putting that E59 on the outer edges of the legs and also the little portion that goes right underneath the seat. And then I blended that out with the E57. And then I'm going to use the E55 as the highlight shade, and that is just going to go on the two legs there. And probably it would have made more sense for me to reverse where I put my shadows and have them on the inside of the legs, but it's not a big deal. I think it still looks fine. It's definitely not going to be the focus of this card. So now I'm going to move on to the chair, and the chair is another big object, so it can be intimidating for some people to color, but once again I'm going to break it down step by step. I'm going to break it down into sections as well. That's the great thing about this chair, is that it's not just one big area, like there's different parts of it, and each of the parts kind of has its own light sources, kind of where the light is reflecting off of it based on its shape. So I'm just going to take it one step at a time. My markers for this one are R000, R00, R01, and R02. So I started with the R02, and I'm putting my shadows on the outer areas of this back part of the chair, and then blending toward the center with the highlight. It's going to be a little bit more shadowed on the left since the girl is sitting there and would be casting a shadow, and also the lamp is going to go on the right side of the chair, so that side would be getting more light. Then I'm going to start doing the little wings and putting a shadow where it joins to the back of the chair, and then the highlight will be on the area that is bumped out. So I'm just using all four shades, blending out toward the edges. I'm also going to do the armrest on the other side. The inner part would be mostly shadowed because the girl is sitting up against it, so very little light would hit that. And also on kind of the scroll part of the left-hand side, it would be getting more light as it's turned out. So I'm going to put my highlight on the left side for that. And then I'm going to come over to the right hand side and do the same thing, just reversing where I put my shadows. So now they're going on the left hand side so that they match, going with the inner portion, and then that scrolled out part is going to get the light. So I'm going to continue coloring that, and I also will be adding a design to this chair later on, but I need this ink to dry first, so I'm going to move on to my other coloring and come back to that later. I'm also going to come in and get that little triangle between her legs and make sure that I color that with the same color as the chair as well. I really love this chair. I was super excited when I saw it because there's just so many ways that you could color this. I mean, you could obviously just color it simply like I'm doing right now before I put the pattern on it, but there's also so many patterns you could do on it: polka dots, plaid, just so many different things. I'm going to do a floral print, and you could do a smaller floral print. Mine's going to be pretty big because I wanted it to just really stand out. But yeah, there's tons of ways to color this chair. I'm very, very excited about coloring it up in different ways in the future. Next, I'm going to move over to the little bunny slippers and just color the inner part with the R01, just real quick and easy so they have a little bit of contrast on the inside. And then I'm going to color in the lampshade to match the chair. I'm not going to be adding the pattern to the lampshade, so I went with slightly lighter colors to start. I left off the R02, but there wasn't enough contrast on it for me, so I did go back and add a second layer, adding in that R02 the second time around. And I'm pulling that color toward the center because I want it to look like this lamp is turned on And so in order to do that, I need to bring in some yellow. So I started out with Y000, and I'm just putting kind of like a glow in the center there, just coloring right over that R000 and adding that little bit of shading. And then right where the light bulb would be, I added in some Y11 and then colored back over the edges of that with the Y000. And then I'm going to move on to my book pages. I'm going to use E50 and E51 for those. Could have done that when I had those shades out for her hair, but I just didn't think about it at the time. So just those two shades for the book pages, and then I'm also going to do a tiny bit of shading on the teacup. And then I'm going to switch to a blue combo. I'm using B23, B24, and B26, and I was going back and forth whether I wanted to do her shorts or her sweater with this combo, but I decided to do the shorts and make it kind of look like denim. So I started out with the B26, and then I'm blending up with the B24, and then the B23, and then I realized I needed a fourth shade so I could have a little bit of a lighter highlight for more contrast. So I pulled in the B21, and then I'm going to jump over and color in one of the books with these shades. I'm doing the middle book. So she looks like she has bare legs. I think she does have bare legs and then little socks in the drawing, but I think you could also make it look like she's wearing a skirt and some leggings that just have some fringe on them. So you could color her feet to be skin toned and then give her some leggings if you wanted to. But I did the shorts for today. I'm going to move on to some purple tones, but I wanted like some dusty purples. So I went with V20, V22, V25, and V28. And I'm going to do the book that she is reading. And I just started at the bottom and blended up toward the top for the highlight, because that would be where the light would be catching it. And then I'm also going to take just the lightest two shades of those and do the tips of the little plant so it can look like a succulent. I have a lot of succulents in my house. I have an entire windowsill devoted to succulents and cacti in my craft room. So I wanted to do that. And then I just decided to use that lightest tone, the V20, to do my white shading. So I did her socks and then her little shirt that's underneath her sweater, and I also did the little cuff and her bunny slippers. So if you feel like doing something different other than the traditional gray or like a pale aqua, a pale purple makes a really good highlight for white as well. Then I'm moving on to some dusty greens to go with my dusty purples. I used BG90, BG93, and BG96 to color in the rest of that succulent. And because that BG90 is super pale, it's going to blend straight into those pale purple tones. So it makes a really seamless transition between those. Plus it really does remind me of a succulent. Most of mine have this dusty green tone. And I'm going to come back and use more of these shades later on, but it's going to come into my chair design, so I'm going to wait and do that a little bit later. For now, I'm going to switch to Y21 and Y26, and I'm going to do the stand of the lamp. I wanted that to look like it was metallic gold, and this combo I think works really well for that. It kind of gives the illusion of gold. I went back in with a little extra of that Y26 and a touch more of the Y21, and also did the little pull with the Y26. And then I wanted to give my teacup a little extra elegance, so I gave it a gold handle and a gold base with that Y26 as well. And then I'm going to add in the Y000 and do my kitty. So I'm starting with the Y21 for him. I wanted him to be kind of like a golden tabby. So I'm blending out the Y21 with the Y000 and leaving a little bit of white on his face. So I just kind of let that fade into the white cardstock there. And then I'm going to do a second layer on him as well, just to beef up that saturation a bit and blend that out with the Y000 again. And then I let that dry for maybe 30 seconds, and then I'm going to come in with the Y26 and start to give him some tiger stripes on his forehead and also down his back, going over his hindquarters and then all the way around to his tail, just doing little triangle shapes. And then I'm going to do his front leg as well, just to tie that pattern in all over. I also wanted to give my kitty some rosy cheeks and color in his nose and the insides of his ears. So I used R000 and R11 for that, and just added those. I think that makes him look extra cute. And then I'm also going to do like a little design on the teacup. So I'm starting out with a little blob with those two shades as well, and then I'll come back to that later on. But now I'm going to come in and use some orange tones, like kind of a burnt orange shade. I'm using YR12, YR14, and YR18 to color in the little girl's sweater. I started with the YR18 and mapped out some shadows first with that, and then I'm blending that out with the YR14, making sure to leave some room for a nice highlight with that YR12. I'm also going to color in one of the books on the stack. I'm going to do the one on the bottom using that same three shades, just darkest at the bottom, highlight at the top. And then I'm going to do the little potted succulent as if it were like a terracotta pot. And I just put my shadows over on the right hand side, highlights on the left. So that is pretty close to a terracotta pot, I think, with these burnt orange shades. And now I am finally ready to start adding my design onto my couch. I started with R01, but quickly realized that wasn't going to be dark enough. I needed something a little bit stronger, so I used the R02. So it's the same shade that I did for my darkest shadows on the couch. And I'm just going to do some large blobs on the couch, kind of oval shaped, not really too perfect, like it doesn't have to be perfectly round, can be a little more sketchy because this is just the under layer. And I'm going to do it all over, just going here and there, almost like I'm doing large polka dots, and even going over the seams of the couch and, you know, making the pattern kind of match up as it goes over the different sections of that. So once I have the big blobs laid in, I'm going to go in with a darker shade. I'm actually going to go back to my YR18, and I'm going to turn these blobs into roses just by making little lines and swirls right over the blob. No rhyme or reason, just here and there wherever I think they should go. Very quick and easy. It's a really fun way to just create a nice pattern on something, and you know, it doesn't have to be like too fancy, but it really has a nice visual impact. So there were two places where I kind of went outside the lines on my couch. So I'm just going to quickly grab my Colorless Blender and clean those up a bit so, you know, you won't have those little lines on the white part of the die once they're cut out. And then I'm going to come back to my green combo like I mentioned and add in some leaves. I'm also going to color in the top book on the stack. I wanted it to look different than the succulent, so I just used the darkest two shades for that. And then I'm going to come in with that BG93 first and start to do some wide kind of rose shaped leaves, like the leaves on a rose plant, I mean. Just kind of doing little curved lines and connecting them together and filling in some of the gaps between these large flowers on that pattern. So I'm just going around here and there, not really making them perfect, just really sketchy, just like I did the flowers, and just filling them wherever I think they should go. And then I'm going to add in a few with the BG90 as well. I didn't do a ton with this because it was so pale. It didn't really show up as well as I had hoped, but it still adds a little bit of something in the pattern that has a contrast. It's like the two tones of the roses. And then I'll take the BG96 and just add a line to the center of all of the leaves that I colored with the BG93. And then I'll switch to the BG93 and do a little line down the center of all of the ones that I did with the BG90. And my camera died right there. But then I'm going to go back to my little teacup and add the rose to the center of that with the YR18. And then I can do the same shades for the leaves, except I just did the BG93 and then a touch of the BG96 down the center of those petals. So I also have a fun design. And then I grabbed the E44 to color in the T on the inside. Then I'm going to take my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just get that started off to the side. Make sure it's flowing nicely. And I'm going to go over the eye of my little girl just to make it nice and bright again. And then I will trim all of these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm going to take some Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and some Saltwater Taffy Distress Oxide ink. And I'm going to blend that onto the center in a circular pattern. I'm using super light pressure because I want this to be very pale. It's very similar in tone to the shades that I used on the couch, but I want the couch to still be able to stand out. So I don't want this to get too dark, and I want it to be very, very soft and hazy as it fades into the white around it. So I'm just being very, very careful to not push down too hard and kind of keep that light pressure going until I get the look that I'm going for. And then once I'm done laying down color on that, I'm going to grab some water. It's just plain water. I'm going to spritz that onto an acrylic block so I have a bit more control. Pick that up with a thin paintbrush and tap that over the edge so that I can create some little water droplets just to have some more texture in that background. And then I'll let that dry for about 30 seconds and then I'll blot that up with a paper towel. I'm going to repeat that process again because I wanted a few more drops. Blot that up once more. And then I wanted to add a tiny bit of sparkle, so I grabbed my Lawn Fawn Liquid Stardust. I'm going to squirt that onto the block as well. And I'm just going to use a very little amount of this. I'm going to even mix it with the water I already had there and kind of keep it concentrated in the center. I want to stamp a sentiment at the top of this panel, and sometimes it's hard to stamp over those splatters, so I just was very soft with it. I also trimmed down some Lawn Fawn wood grain cardstock in the craft color and another piece of Bristol, just a very thin strip. So I'm going to add the wood grain piece down to the bottom to be the floor, and I just had to decide which way I wanted my wood grain to go. And then I'm going to take that white strip, and that's going to be my baseboard. So I'm going to add that right at the top. I didn't want to lose too much of that wood grain cardstock, so I put it right at the top there, although it started to creep up, so I had to just readjust that and hold that in place for just a couple of seconds until it dried. And then I popped this panel in my Misty. I decided to stamp my sentiment using walnut ink from Lawn Fawn, and there's some really great sentiments in this stamp set. The one I'm using says, rainy days should be spent at home with a cup of tea and a good book by Bill Watterson. I did stamp that down twice to make sure I had a nice bold impression. Then I'll set this panel aside and pop my card base in my Misty. I'm using a piece of Lawn Fawn apricot cardstock that I've scored and folded to a standard A2 size card with a top fold. And I stamped a few more images from Page Turner, as well as another sentiment that says, "Good books, like good friends, are few and chosen. The more select, the more enjoyable," by Louisa May Alcott. So now I'm ready to start assembling. I'm going to take my focal panel and adhere that to the front of my card base, just making sure that it is lined up nice and straight at all four corners. And then I can bring in my images, and I'm going to start with the girl in the chair and the lamp. I want those to be nicely spaced in the center of the card, so I'm just kind of figuring out exactly where I want them to go before committing and adhering them down. I'm going to start with the lamp and glue that so that it is about equally as far from the right edge as the chair will be from the left edge. And also it's going to be nice and tall and really draw your eye up toward that great sentiment. Then I'm going to adhere the girl in her chair down, and again making sure that that is spaced about equally, that the farthest part of the chair is about the same distance as the farthest part of the lampshade. So then I'm going to take the kitty, and my original idea was to have him sitting up on top of the chair, but there's lots of places you could put him. You could definitely go down on the floor, or probably in front of the little girl on the chair as well. I think there's enough space that you could squeeze him on there, but I decided not to commit quite yet and put the books and the plant down first. I wanted the succulent to be kind of sitting on top of the stack of books, and then I could decide on the kitty afterwards. And I ended up deciding to go back with my original idea, which was to have him up at the top, because I also think that really pulls your eye toward the sentiment. Then I'm going to put her little bunny slippers down below the chair, which I think are so cute. Then I'm going to take the teacup and rest it on the right arm of the chair, and then add the little steam right above that, so it looks like it's still piping hot. And just adjusted that a little bit lower there. And I thought about adding some stickles, but there didn't really seem to be a good place to put them, so I decided that I would call this card good. So I'm going to lift that up to the camera so you can see all of that detail, and it does have the sparkle with the liquid stardust in the background. And then there is another peek at the inside. If you are watching this video the day it goes live, this is day 1 of previews for the August 11th release, so you can check out even more inspiration on the Hello Bluebird blog. And I'll be back tomorrow with more sneak peeks of this new release. So make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed this, subscribe, ring that notification bell so you don't miss a future video. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy in the meantime. And I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.